This meeting of the Committee on Human Rights dated August 15, 2017 is now called to order. Roll call of members.
Madam Chair, I move to dispense the calling of the roll. Second.
There's a motion to dispense with the calling of the roll, and which was duly seconded. The calling of the roll is hereby dispensed. Now for the next part, may I call on our committee secretary, Felipe Arcon, for the invocation.
Let's all please rise. Let us put ourselves in the presence of our Lord, the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty and loving Father, creator of heaven and earth, we praise you and adore you. You are the King of kings. We humbly ask your forgiveness for our sins. Have mercy on us, Lord. We are gathered here today for our meeting for the deliberation of the Human Rights Defenders Bill and the CHR Charter. Send us your Holy Spirit to be our guide and give us the wisdom to understand every topic that we are going to discuss today. Enlighten our minds and let your love be upon us. May this meeting bring success and growth to the committee and to all the stakeholders. We thank you, Father, for this precious time that you have given us. Always we pray through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever. Amen. Amen.
First, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our colleagues and members of the Committee on Human Rights, Honorable Lawrence Fortun from the 1st District of Agusan del Norte, Honorable Franz Castro from CHR Party List, Honorable Carlos Izagani Zarate of Bayan Muna Party List, Honorable Ariel Kaayek Casilaw from Anak Pawi's Party List, and Honorable Sara Ilago from Kabataan Party List. And for the acknowledgement of our resource persons, may I call on our ComSec, Ms. Felipe Arcon.
Thank you, Your Honor. For today's hearing, the following are in attendance. We have the Chair of the Commission on Human Rights, Commissioner Chito Gascon. Commissioner Lea Sita Nodra Armamento. We have from the Department of Justice, Attorney Maria Lorena Calo and Attorney Lourdes Gisela R. Mendoza. From the NCCP, the Program Secretary, we have Dr. Romel G. Linato. From the Philippine National Police Human Rights Affairs Office, we have Police Superintendent Veronica Peñalosa. From the Armed Forces of the Philippines, OJ-7, we have Lieutenant Colonel Resurrection Mariano. From the Presidential Human Rights Committee, we have USEC Severo Catura. From the National Union of NUPL, the Secretary General, we have Attorney Efrain B. Cortez. Also from the CHR, we have Attorney Gemma Paruhinog, Policy Office, and Attorney Eunice Santa Maria Manahan. From Amnesty International, Mr. Wilnor Papa. Those are all in. Yes. Oh, Mr. Bayani Mercado, sorry, sir. From the Department of Foreign Affairs, UNIO, we have Mr. Bayani Mercado. Morning, sir. And Ms. Cristina Palabay from Karapatan. Good morning.
Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. Good morning. The chair is very much pleased with your attendance in today's meeting. We have a plate full of very relevant issues in the agenda. First is the Human Rights Defenders Protection Act. or House Bills number 1617, authored by Representative Honorable Izagani Zarate, Honorable Antonio Tino, Honorable Emi De Jesus, Honorable Franz Castro, Honorable Arlene Brosas, Honorable Ariel Casilo, and Honorable Sarah Jane Ilago. I remember distinctly my expression of commitment to enact this bill into law about a year ago, when I was invited to speak on the National Summit for Human Rights Defenders, an event that was sponsored by the Medical Action Group and Task Force Detainees of the Philippines, and whose project is funded by the European Union. At that time, there had been some 1,160 unsolved extrajudicial killings and some 700 deaths in the course of police operations. These numbers have multiplied to some unprecedented figures, and the advocates and defenders of human rights at this juncture of our history have no reason to be complacent, nor to proceed with blinders or blinkers on, similar to horses who are prevented from being scared of their surroundings. The cold statistics of violations to human rights, the rights that are guaranteed under the 1987 Constitution, are growing exponentially, while defenders of human rights continue to face the challenges of daily struggles for freedoms and dignity. As I have articulated in that same summit, the role of the state as duty bearers cannot be overemphasized, for we are bound by law to ensure accountability, transparency, and adherence to rule of law. And we must create and maintain an enabling environment for respect for the primacy of human rights if we are to remain true to our mandate as state's duty bearers. There is a recognized functional equation between the state as duty bearers and the people as rights holders. And this intricate balance must be borne equally by those two forces if justice and peace, respect and fulfillment of human rights are to be attained. You, on the other hand, as human rights, defenders of human rights, should also be included in the functional equation. Human rights defenders must be recognized and empowered to protect the rights of the people who are governed by the state. The question must inevitably be asked, who are to defend the defenders? This bill on the agenda aims to supply the gap in the equation, is anchored on the following objectives: to protect human rights defenders in our country against all forms of attack that may pose threats against their lives and liberties and of their families, and to promote their rights, which include the right to information, the right to develop and advocate ideas, the right to file an action involving human rights violations, right against vilification, among others. This bill has also gained support from human rights defenders from Asia Forum for Human Rights and Development, or Forum Asia, the International Federation for Human Rights, or FIDH, and Suara Rakyat Malaysia. And I had the opportunity to meet their representatives last week. Today, we have with us here Ms. Pimsiri. Is she here? Ms. Pimsiri Petchamrob of FIDH, Forum Asia, to enrich our discussion with her own experience and knowledge on the subject. Good morning, Ms. Pimsiri. Moving on to the second part of the agenda, the Commission on Human Rights Charters have been deliberated initially during the organizational meeting of this committee on November 22, 2016. Presently, there are 5 bills on the matter. House Bill number 1303, authored by Representative Relampagos. House Bill number 1512, authored by Representative Alejano. House Bill number 2343, authored by Representative Lawrence Fortun, who is here with us this morning. House Bill number 3217, authored by Representative Escudero, and House Bill number 4078, authored by Representative Gus Tambunting. On August 7, 2017, the Commission on Human Rights was subjected to a tough scrutiny of its budget proposal, as we all know. And with the threat of zero budget and abolition of the Commission, the future seems bleak for human rights and everything else that human rights have stood for. This gives us more impetus to deliberate on the 5 bills pending before us today, to exercise our legislative mandate to study and deliberate on measures referred to our committee, and to manifest our support to the Commission as the national human rights institution. This committee manifests its unwavering support to the CHR and the ideals that embodies for the promotion and protection of human rights. In today's hearings, we call on a particular resource person to articulate their positions on the bills. The first to be tackled is the Human Rights Defenders Bill, and probably at around 11:30 a.m., we are ready to move on to the CHR Charter bills. The technical working group created for the CHR Charter will further refine the discussions that will ensue today. The chair is now ready to yield to the floor to the authors who are present, to be followed by resource person. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Before we proceed with our authors, maybe first tackle the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Okay, Honorable Casilaw, please
Precisely,
go ahead.
I move for the approval of our previous minutes, meeting of our previous meeting.
There's a motion for the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting and duly seconded. There being no objection, the motion is carried and the minutes is approved. Now, may we call on our authors to please give their sponsorship speech. Honorable Carlos Sagani-Zarate.
Maraming salamat, Madam Chair. Thank you. Good morning to all our colleagues and as well as our resource persons at sa lahat ho ng ating mga kapwa manggagawa sa gobyerno at mga bisita. Before I proceed, Madam Chair, may I also acknowledge one of our guests, Diane Lewis, from the International Federation of Human Rights, who is also with us this morning, together with Pimsiri Pachnamrov. To expedite the proceedings, Madam Chair, may I just adopt the attached explanatory note of House Bill number 167 as the collective sponsorship speech of the authors, but I want to emphasize some of the statements in this explanatory note. Madam Chair, rightly, you mentioned that the HR defenders in our country must be empowered. And somehow we have to also defend our defenders, considering the attacks that our human rights defenders is now experiencing, suffering, no? In defending the human rights of our people. In fact, in 2015, just for emphasis, the Philippines is the second highest in killings of human rights defenders worldwide, according to the 2000 report of the Frontline Defenders, or the International Foundation for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders. The Philippines is second only to Colombia and the highest outside of the Americas. According to the report, the 31 killings of HR defenders in the Philippines in 2015 make up almost 60% of the 52 killings reported in the Asia and Pacific region. Human rights defenders in the country face human rights violations themselves in the course of their work, and these violations include killings, death threats, abductions, and kidnappings, arbitrary arrest and detention, and other actions of harassment and intimidations, such as defamation campaigns, vilification, and the filing of trump-up charges aimed at harassing human rights workers. All these violations, Madam Chair, also target the immediate family members of human rights defenders, including their children and their other relatives, so as to prevent them from continuing their activities, that is to defend the rights of our people. Human rights campaigns are affected in many regions in the country by restrictions on the activities and the persecution of human rights defenders, leaving the people more vulnerable to human rights violations and abuses. Worst, human rights defenders in the country have been tagged as quote, enemies of the states, close quote, by government agents and harshly dealt with as such. Not a few of them, like Eden Marceliana, Eddie Gomanoy, Lema Fortu, and a colleague of mine from Davao City, Benjamin Hernandez, were brutally slain because of their activities. For example, during the term of then-President Gloria Arroyo, there were at least 1,206 victims of extrajudicial, summary, or arbitrary executions in the country. Of the total number, 476 were human rights defenders. Of the 206 victims of enforced or involuntary disappearance, 68 were human rights defenders. Scores from the ranks of the human rights defenders have also been physically assaulted, tortured, treated inhumanely, cruelly, and degradingly, and threatened, harassed, and intimidated. Also, Madam Chair, as of in 2015, trump-up charges were also filed against members of the Karapatan human rights and workers and defenders, like from Southern Mindanao in Davao, in Davao, Hanimay Suaso, the Secretary General of Karapatan in Southern Mindanao, the Reverend Allen Bill Beloso, the Chairperson of Karapatan in the Soxargen area, and Pastor Sadrak Sabilla, the Secretary General of Karapatan in Soxargen. Worst, even in the dying days of the past Aquino administration, trump-up charges were also slapped and warrants of arrest were issued against 15 human rights defenders who supported the cause of the displaced Lumans or indigenous peoples who were forced to seek refuge at the UCCP Haran Center in Davao City. These human rights defenders include, again, Karapatan's Hanimar Zuaso, Bayan leader Ryan Lariba, farmer leader Tony Salobre, Jimboy Marciano, Gabriela Davao spokesperson Mary Ann Sapar, Jaja Nicosia, a journalist, farmer leader Pedro Arnado, Lumad leader Carlan Fenagel, Sister Stella Matutina, Sister Ristita Meles, Lumad leader Isidro Indao, child rights advocate Carlo Manamo, and Rios Valley of the Save Our Schools, and UCCP Pastor Jury Jaime. Women human rights defenders are also particularly at risk, and other groups and categories of defenders who are particularly exposed to attacks and human rights violations as a result of their work that they carry out include defending working to promote civil and political rights. Considering the important role, Madam Chair, of human rights defenders in the protection of human rights in the country, and the Philippine government's commitment to promote, defend, and protect human rights, and the continuing attack on the rights of our people and the human rights defenders, it is imperative that Congress should put into law that commitment as enshrined in the UN General Assembly resolutions on the rights of human rights defenders. It is necessary that the relevant provisions of the International Declaration are translated into a binding commitment not only to protect the human rights, but also those that work for the protection of these rights so that they may be able to fulfill their important role in the promotion, protection, and defense of human rights and the fundamental freedoms of our people. In this light, Madam Chair, we pray for the expeditious approval of this bill by this committee as well as by the 17th Congress. We first filed this bill in the 14th Congress. We refiled this during the last Congress, and I hope it will see the light of the day in the 17th Congress. Daghang salamat, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Zarate. Malapit na po pala maging senior citizen itong bill na ito. 14th Congress, 15th Congress, 16th, and now we're on the 17th. So, times 3, that's already 12 years. Malapit na pala mag-debut. Thank you, Honorable Zarate. May we hear from the other authors, or is a collective?
Yes, briefly, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
Honorable Casilaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill is personally significant with this representation because prior to my being a representative of Anakpawis, I served for almost 6 years of Karapatan in the region where I came from, in southern Mindanao. And I personally experienced those, my colleague who, yung pinaliwanag ng ating kasamang si Congressman Zarate, he himself, even as an elected Bayan Muna representative, faced trump-up charges after the Haran incident 2 years ago. And yun nga po, tutungtungan ko po yung sinabi po ninyo, who will defend the defenders? Meron po tayong mga institusyon. We have recognized institutions like the Commission on Human Rights. But outside of those constitutional bodies or government agencies na may ganitong responsibilidad, yung mga civil society organizations po natin, non-government organizations, performing in the defense of human rights, either sa usapin ng lupa, land rights, sa usapin ng political, civil rights, are exposed to the dangers in the performance of their duties. No? Kaya po, mahalaga na meron po tayong maliban sa, meron na tayong mga kasalukuyang batas in the protection of human rights. This bill will strengthen existing laws and definitely will focus in particular to human rights defenders, not only limited to government agencies, Madam Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Casilaw. We understand the need for defending the human rights defenders. If ever that we are able to really push and pass this bill into law, this will be a landmark legislation. Not only first in the Philippines, but maybe first in our region. Right? So before we proceed, I would like to recognize the presence of Honorable Ramon Rocamora from the Lone District of CHR. Any other comments from our principal authors? Okay, may we ask a comment from the Commission on Human Rights? I believe that we have furnished, at the committee already furnished the CHR copy of the bills. Yes, Honorable Chito Gascon, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, members of the committee, and the authors of the bill, as well as resource persons here present this morning. Yes, Your Honor, we have received a copy of the bill, and we join the authors of the bill in expressing a sense of urgency about the need to establish a more robust legal framework to protect and defend human rights defenders. And so while we have a position paper and we will submit this in due course to the committee, let me say at the beginning of this meeting that the Commission on Human Rights unequivocally and fully supports the passage of this measure to protect human rights defenders. We join the statements of the Honorable Chair of this committee, as well as the principal authors, in stressing that at this period in our country's history, it becomes essential and incumbent upon the state as duty bearer to create all conditions necessary to protect human rights defenders. The notion or idea of defending the defenders, of course, achieved international recognition with the adoption in 1999 of the UN Declaration for Human Rights Defenders. And in particular, that UN resolution adopted by the General Assembly mandates in Article 2 and Article 3 thereof the importance of the state creating the legal framework for protection. In particular, may I read from Article 3? Domestic law, consistent with the Charter of the United Nations and other international obligations of the state in the field of human rights and fundamental freedoms, is the juridical framework within which human rights and fundamental freedoms should be implemented and enjoyed, and within which all activities referred to in the present declaration for the promotion, protection, and effective realization of those rights and freedoms should be conducted. And so if this bill is approved quickly, our dear friends who have authored this have said that this has been pending for several Congresses already. And under the able leadership of the current chair, we are confident that this measure will finally see the light of day. We shall send a very strong signal, should this be approved, to the region in the world that despite the challenges we face today, we acknowledge the role that human rights defenders, many of whom are here present, our friends from Karapatan, NUPL, Amnesty International are here. We acknowledge the contribution, the positive contribution they make to human rights, and that this state will do everything to protect and promote their interests, because their interests of advancing human rights will be for the interests of the whole country. So we unequivocally support this measure, Your Honor.
Thank you, Chairman Gascon. May we call on a representative from PNP, H. Rao, Police Superintendent Peñalosa, for the comment on the bill.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and to the members of the Committee on Human Rights. The Philippine National Police will submit the official comment on House Bill number 1617. Nevertheless, may I cite the comments of the Philippine National Police Human Rights Affairs Office regarding the said House Bill. Given the social, doctrinal, constitutional, legal, and moral rationale behind the police duty and obligation to promote and protect human rights, this office recommends this initiative, which would better protect the rights of the human rights defenders and ensure their safety. However, Madam Chair, we have reservations on the following. The definition of human rights organization as mentioned on para F of section 3. This office opines that the said definition should also mention the qualifications or credentials of the human rights organization. With regard to section 4, presumption and prohibitions, the Office of the Human Rights Affairs Office expresses its reservation on the 3-day reglementary periods as provided on para 3A, that's subpara 3, 4, and 5. The 3-day reglementary period is too short for the concerned government agency to take appropriate action on the matters mentioned, and the provision suggests that failure to act within 3 days presumably imputes the act to the government agent. Technicality should not be a ground to impute the acts as mentioned in section 4A. For para A paragraph 7, any complaint for human rights violations is presumed to be true and valid unless proven otherwise. This provision can be subject to abuse and various interpretations. It is recommended that only complaints with valid grounds or basis should be acted upon, and those which are malicious in nature should be outright denied. For para B1, presumption of regularity in the performance of duty. Para B1 of House Bill number 1617 contravenes Rule 131, Section 3M of the Rules of Court, which mentions the definition of presumption of regularity as presuming that the official duty has been regularly performed, hence can be used as a valid defense in court proceedings. And para B3, confidentiality on the military activity or that it is or affects national security interests if the issues raised are related to the work of human rights defenders. The right of the government security sector not to disclose information that affects national security interests should not be tilted to favor the rights of human rights defenders. The paramount consideration should be the welfare of the public. With regard to Section 14, right to establish a sanctuary to human rights victims or their families, it is opined that the legislative measure should clearly define what sanctuary means. The legislative measure not only mentions the liability of government unit personnel on the violation of the rights of human rights defenders and fail to state the possible violation that may be committed by non-state armed groups. Hence, it is opined that for purposes of transparency, it should also define the liability of non-state actors. With the reservations said by the Office of the Human Rights Affairs Office, nevertheless, the PNP HRAO supports the House bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Police Superintendent Veronica Peñalosa. The committee doesn't have a copy of the one you read. Is that the official comment of HRAO, PNP HRAO, pertaining to this bill?
Sorry, Madam Chair. The PNP will submit our official response to the inquiry. The PNP chief will sign the document, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And we'll just wait for us to be... Honorable Rocamora. Before we proceed, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Tita, Honorable Evelina Escudero from the 1st District of Sorsogon. Honorable Rocamora, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what was that you just read?
Office lang po ng Human Rights, comments lang po ng PNP Human Rights Affairs Office. This does not include pa po yung comments from other offices po ng PNP. So i-collate po kasi ng Office of the Chief PNP every comment and it will be submitted only once po. And that comment will be signed by the Chief PNP.
Can you give us a copy of that one that you just read?
Madam Chair, if I may, can we wait for the approved comment from the Chief PNP, considering that this still has to pass through the command group?
So you're saying that that comment may still be overridden by the final comment of PNB, but you just read it. That's official, that's on record.
But, sir, on record, this will be submitted to the Directorate for Plans, who will collate every comment from other PNP offices. And Directorate for Plans will submit the report to the Chief PNP for his signature, and then it will eventually be received by the committee.
So what was your purpose then in reading it?
Madam Chair,
Honorable Zarate.
with the kind indulgence of Congressman Rocamora. So it appears that it's not official. May we just move that it be stricken out of the record because it appears that it's not yet official, Madam Chair.
I think it should remain on record. It should. It should. Although not official, because that is part of the proceeding today.
Honorable Fortune.
Madam Chair, I think what she's saying is that it's not yet official because it's not yet complete. The comment is as far as the Human Rights Affairs Office of the PNP is concerned, and they're still waiting for the other comments of the other divisions of the PNP. So, are we made to understand that as far as the Human Rights Affairs Office of the PNP is concerned, that comment is already official?
As far as the PNP Human Rights Affairs Office is concerned, yes, Your Honor, it will be submitted to the command group.
Madam Chair.
So so yun ang taro ha. As far as your office is concerned, that is already official. You're saying that we're waiting for the PNP's official comment dahil inaantay pa natin yung manggagaling sa ibang offices. So I think, Madam Chair, that should remain on record.
Okay, thank you,
I
Honorable
will withdraw my
Honorable
earlier
Secretary.
statement. If that is the case, if that is already official as far as HRO is concerned, we can request for a copy of that already, Madam Chair, to be submitted to this committee without prejudice to the collated, whatever is that document from the Office of the Chief PNP. So may we request Superintendent Peñalosa to submit such a document to the committee now? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Zarate. I understand the positions of our colleagues. Since it's already read on record, it's already part of the proceeding of the committee. And besides, the committee issued the invitation to PNP HRAW office. So since that's what is the position of the HRAW office, the HRAW, then we'll just ask for a written copy and signed by the director of the PNP HRAW. Yes, Superintendent Peñalosa.
Madam Chair, the chief of the Human Rights Affairs Office is currently not currently on official travel abroad. So what will be submitted is just signed by me, who is the officer in charge. Nevertheless, if the committee can allow us, the Chief HRAW, General Sherbo, will be returning next week, if it can still wait, so that it will have the signature of General Sherbo.
Okay. In the meantime, the committee or the chair will accept the copy coming from you, Superintendent Peñalosa, until we also receive the official report or official comment from Chief Superintendent Siervo. Okay. The reason why we need a written copy is that you have certain reservations, or you have reservations on several parts of the bill. So that's we want to be guided accordingly during our discussion and deliberation. Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair. This copy initially will be submitted to the committee.
Okay, thank you. May we call on an attorney, Ephraim Cortez from NUPL.
Good morning, Your Honors. As repression intensifies, the state of impunity remains. Human rights violations also increase and are being committed by state forces in blatant manner. Under these circumstances, the work of human rights defenders become more complicated and dangerous. They become the object of attack by state forces. They are being vilified and stigmatized, which is a prelude to physical harassment, intimidation, and threat, and/or to abduction and killing. It is actually an open season for human rights defenders in the Philippines. And as the going gets tough, the human rights defenders take the brunt. Unfortunately, despite their important role in human rights protection, and while the Philippine government is constitutionally mandated to promote, defend, and protect human rights, no sufficient legal safeguards are in place to protect the rights, life, liberty, and security of those involved in human rights protection. The lack of legal protection and even legal recognition to human rights defenders contribute to the impunity by which the attacks are carried out against them, even by state forces. The enactment into law of the Human Rights Defenders Bill will give an official and legal recognition to the role of human rights defenders in the promotion and defense of human rights, and will also provide the much-needed protection to their life, liberty, and security. It may also discourage attacks against them and may reduce their vulnerabilities, giving them more space to practice their advocacy. To date, the National Union of People's Lawyers has recorded more than 43 lawyers killed and 57 attacks since 2001. In 2010, 15 lawyers and 3 judges fell victims of extrajudicial killings. 13 other lawyers were harassed, intimidated, and received death threats. Of the known perpetrators recorded, 65% were identified to be members of the military, while 20% were from the police service. According to a report of Endangered Lawyers Day Foundation, from 2001 to 2015, 47 out of 57 lawyers that have been threatened, harassed, intimidated, and surveilled were directly involved in human rights cases. In fact, there were more lawyers under surveillance, which is 35, and maliciously labeled 37, during the period 2001 to the present than in the prior years since 1977. Aside from the direct attack and harassment, human rights lawyers fall victims of a continued propaganda of the armed forces of the Philippines under then Oplan Bayanihan and now Oplan Kapayapaan. Human rights lawyers and defenders are labeled as enemies of the state, thus making them vulnerable targets of the counterinsurgency of the government. In fact, in 2013, Lieutenant General Noel Caballes, then Chief of the Philippine Army, branded the NUPL and Karapatan as enemies due to their reaction to the promotion of General Aurelio Baladad, who has pending criminal cases involving human rights with the Sandigan Bayan and with the Commission on Human Rights. Many of our members are under attack. They are labeled and referred to by the armed forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police as red lawyers, lawyers of communist terrorists. In one case, we were able to get a writ of amparo, but the labeling and harassment against our lawyer continue. In the proceedings, which is similar in all other cases involving the same kind of harassment, we had difficulty getting information and evidence, especially as regards the identity of the perpetrators, especially from the AFP and the PNP, because they refused to provide the needed information to prosecute, to identify, investigate, and prosecute their personnel. Perpetrators are in fact shielded by the same organization that they belong to, thereby ensuring that they escape investigation and prosecution. In few instances where investigation and prosecution were instituted, not only the low-ranking officers are subjected to investigation and prosecution. In view of the foregoing, we support the passage of the Human Rights Defenders Bill with a suggestion to further strengthen the presumptions already indicated in the bill, and we further recommend that the provision on command responsibility be included so that higher-ranking military and police officers will not be allowed to escape investigation and prosecution for attacks against human rights defenders committed by their subordinates. Thank you, Your Honors.
Thank you, Attorney Cortez. So, no other specific comments on the specific provisions in the bill?
We will submit our position paper in a few days, Your Honor. The written position paper.
Thank you. We'll wait for that. Next, we would like to call on Ms. Cristina Palabay from Karapatan.
Good morning, Madam Chair. This is a very significant.
I'll just cut you shortly,
Yes,
Ms. Palabay. I just would like to recognize the presence of our colleague, Honorable Glona Labad-Labad from Zamboanga del Norte. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and members of the Committee on Human Rights. This is a very significant day for us human rights defenders on the ground because as far as we can recall, this is the first time that the Committee on Human Rights, since the filing of this bill during the 14th Congress, has seen the light of day in a hearing of the committee. And we thank you for that, Madam Chair. It is also one of the best examples of proposed legislations, not only in the Southeast Asian region, but worldwide. We have been with several human rights defenders globally, and they have enriched the said bill also through the practices on the ground that we have and the experiences of other human rights defenders all over the world. House Bill 1617 is a product of the long history and social practice of human rights defense in the Philippines. The drafting of the bill itself is an expression of and an exercise of our right to people's participation in governance, as we in Karapatan, a broad spectrum of human rights defenders, including lawyers, church people, and journalists, and people's organizations, were involved in every step of the way. Several UN independent experts have since voiced out concern on numerous attacks against Filipino human rights defenders, the latest of which is expressed through a July 31, 2017 joint statement of 3 UN independent experts, including the Special Rapporteur on the situation of HRDs. This proposed legislation is therefore an urgent response to a situation that has long been on emergency mode. A foot in the grave best describes our work as human rights defenders on the ground. A foot in the grave. To immediately protect the life and liberty of activists, we form quick reaction teams and fact-finding missions to respond to these cases. During the actual conduct of work of human rights defenders on the ground, there is great difficulty in providing legal and paralegal assistance. Oftentimes, human rights defenders are disallowed access to police and blotter reports, among other public documents. They are also prevented and disallowed to see and inspect military camps and detention facilities. Section 9, or the right to provide paralegal and legal assistance, and Section 16, or the right to access documents of government units and personnel of the proposed bill, addresses this problem. Human rights defenders are being harassed, threatened, and vilified by state agents. We are under surveillance, tailed, and also arbitrarily tagged as NPA members or supporters. This is the reason why AFP Chief Eduardo Año's 100,000 bounty for every NPA arrested or killed is a very dangerous move, because as we have learned, it is very easy for state forces to arbitrarily tag anyone and everyone, including human rights defenders and civilians, as NPAs. Some are even included in the order of battle list and mission orders by the military. This hinders us from effectively carrying out our tasks to protect and defend human rights. Section 11 of the proposed law recognizes the right of HRDs against false labeling or name-calling, or of malicious and fabricated accusations against us of any offense or any other kind of vilification. To date, since 2001, more than 40 human rights workers of Karapatan have been killed by the military in the course of our work. This includes Fernando Baldomero, indigenous rights defender William Bugatti, Romeo Capalla, and Teodoro Escanilla. At least 474 HRDs were killed during the Arroyo presidency, 139 during the Aquino presidency, while 50 have been already killed under the current administration. In sum, a total of 663 human rights defenders have been killed in a 16-year period. Majority are peasants, workers, indigenous peoples, Moro, women, and youth human rights defenders. I and the principal author of this bill, Representative Carlos Zarate, have been implicated in 2015 on fabricated charges of trafficking and kidnapping. We were accused of trafficking and kidnapping of nearly 2,000 Lumad evacuees seeking refuge at the UCCP compound in Davao. I found it ironic that I was charged based on the same law on trafficking of persons, since I personally participated in the drafting and lobbying of the said law as then Secretary General of Gabriela Women's Party. Almost all, Madam Chair, of our officers, of Karapatan officers on the ground, are targeted through trumped-up cases, direct threats to their person and their families. Recently, last July 20, I received an anonymous call from a man who refused to identify himself and who told me to stop my work as a human rights defender, and that times are different now because it is martial law, and that I am included in their list. The cell phone number was later traced as belonging to a soldier of the Armed Forces of the Philippines Safety Battalion. Environmental activist Sherwin De Vera, Mary Ann Gabayan of the Ilocos Human Rights Alliance, and our human rights workers in Panay, Negros, Caraga have also received recent threats to their lives. One can only expect worse situations when martial law is declared nationwide. House Bill 1617 also recognizes the perilous work of human rights defenders and the threats they face. Section 19 of the proposed bill makes a temporary protection order available to human rights defenders against government units or personnel through a petition with the Commission on Human Rights. The bill also empowers the CHR to promulgate rules and procedures covering the petition for TPO, or Temporary Protection Order, and the complaint for contempt, which can be issued motu proprio by the Commission against state agents for refusing to abide by the Temporary Protection Order. These and the other pertinent provisions in the proposed measures are the reason why we fully support House Bill 1617. If at all, what we can perhaps add to the provisions are that of the particular situations and needs and redress measures for women human rights defenders and activists in the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community who experience sexualized forms of attacks because of their gender. With this, Madam Chair, we will be submitting today our position paper with pertinent comments on certain provisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Palabay. And when you say today, what time today? Just kidding. we're not pressuring you, but of course the members would like to have a copy of your written comment and opinion. Thank you. May we now call on representative from the Department of Justice, State Counsel Attorney Gisela Mendoza.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning to everyone. As we were able to, the department wishes to express its reservations on certain provisions on the House Bill 1617, as the request for submission of position paper was only received by the department last August 9, and as well as with the invitation. So we would like to manifest that we will be submitting our official position paper in due time, including the reservations on the proposed bill. On the two bills, on the CHR Charter as well as this specific.
may we know when you can submit that? I believe that, yes, we have provided the invitation for today's hearing, but during the first meeting of this committee, I believe that we have furnished also DOJ a copy of these bills.
This is my first time to attend, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll just wait for your written position. May we know the timetable when we're gonna be submitting that?
In due time, ma'am.
In due time, due
Within the
time.
reasonable time.
That could be days, years, months. May we ask you to submit it, if possible, next week? Okay, thank you, Attorney Mendoza. Next, we call on Yusek Severo Catura from the PHRC.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The honorable representatives, members of the committee, my fellow workers in government, NGOs, friends in the human rights advocacy, magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. Let me reiterate the position which the Philippines forwarded during its third review cycle under the Universal Periodic Review process of the UN Human Rights Council. And I quote, "As a matter of policy, the government promotes and protects the human rights of our people in an environment of inclusivity. Under Administrative Order Number 163, the state, in ensuring its effectiveness in complying with its human rights obligations under the core treaties that it has signed in the last 6 decades, encourages the active participation of NGOs, CSOs, and relevant sectors in the process. In the meantime, the state's legislature or congressional hearings on the enactment of laws that impact on human rights promotion and protection include the participation of human rights defenders. And we wish to stress that many of the members in Congress, especially those coming from the party-list groups, have strong backgrounds as human rights defenders and cause-oriented advocates. Taking this step further, the state is in the process of reviewing the possible enactment of a law that will define certain rights of human rights defenders and will provide penalties for violations," end of quote. Madam Chair, indeed, as mentioned in the last part of that statement, here we are now in the process of reviewing the possibility of enacting the Human Rights Defenders Act. The PHRC Secretariat does not have a definite position on House Bill 1617, and we would like to apologize at this time, given the requirement that a consultation process among key executive officials concerned must be undertaken on crucial human rights issues. But please allow me to share some concerns and questions that the Secretary is grappling at this time to determine the urgency for such a law to be enacted. The first concern is whether indeed there is a lack of state mechanisms that allow individuals and organizations that advocate human rights to be heard, or whether these same individuals and groups have in fact availed of such mechanisms. Note that under each of the 8 core international human rights treaties that the Philippines has signed in the last 60 years, there are specific operational mechanisms with avenues that allow participation of human rights advocates. And in fact, the aim is to empower them to participate. And Madam Chair, we also even have a tripartite mechanism known as a National Monitoring Mechanism, which is chaired by no less than the Commission on Human Rights, which has a very wide open door for NGOs and CSOs to participate on matters that concern human rights. And the enactment of a human rights defenders law seems to impress upon everyone that these mechanisms, including the tripartite mechanism that I mentioned, are infirmed and useless, which the state will not, even in principle, accept. Now, the second concern is, can we indeed say that the state continues to blatantly violate the rights of so-called human rights defenders at this time? Is it really open season for human rights defenders? By far, the cases that have been identified by interest groups that are critical to the present administration involve incidents that occurred before the latter's term. And a check with the AO 35 Interagency Committee and the Presidential Task Force on Media Security reveals that there have been no cases in the last 13 months referred by human rights organizations or even the Commission on Human Rights, save for 7 cases involving media personalities, of which only 1 was verified to be work-related. And there were a few cases that were in fact referred by the DNR, not an NGO or CSO, a government agency, on the alleged killing of forest rangers, and which are now even undergoing the process of verification under the AO 35 interagency mechanism. And third and finally, Madam Chair, by persistently confining the role of human rights defender to non-state actors, does this not put into question or at worst diminish the mandate of the state as duty bearer of rights? This UN-imposed definition rather confounds and needs to be thought of seriously and thoroughly, given that under the duty bearer and claim holder nexus, the state is just as much a human rights defender as anyone or any group that professes to be the same. Now we speak of adhering to a UN-imposed definition, but remember, Madam Chair, these are simply minimum standards that we are being encouraged to follow. But adherence has to be anchored on actual realities on the ground. In summary, Madam Chair, while we do not see the need for such a law to be enacted at this time, given the concerns we have raised, we shall, if directed to do so by this committee, undertake intensive and broader consultations with our stakeholders from within the Executive Department and from outside of government, if only to clarify if indeed our concerns are valid. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Yusek Katura.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Honorable Zarate.
just a quick reaction. With due respect to Undersecretary Katura, hindi ho ang pagsusulong ho ng panukalang batas na ito ay hindi ho para tugunan kung ano ang nangyayari lang ngayon. No, kung narinig ho sana ni Undersecretary Katura, 14 Congress pa ho, sinusulong na ho natin ito dahil sa naranasan ng mga human rights defenders. No? Sabi ninyo, merong mga mekanismo, no? Pinag-aralan niyo yung mga mekanismo na yon. Yung UN standards na yan, sabi ninyo, minimum standards na lang yan. Eh, kahit nga ho minimum standards, hindi ho nasusunod. Ang daming napapaslang, at hindi ho ito gawa-gawa lang, statistika ito ng totoo, buhay na karanasan ng marami. Kaya ho, nagsulong tayo ng batas na ito. Hindi ho ito para lang sa nakaraan, para ngayon, kundi para sa hinaharap. Dahil napakabuhay po ng karanasan ng mga human rights defenders na ang kanilang karapatan mismo ay nalalabag. No, hindi ko na ho binanggit kanina kung paanong sinampahan kami. Ako mismo, bilang mambabatas, sinampasahan ng gawa-gawang kaso. No? At ito ay tahasang ginagawa ng mga ahente ng Estado. No? Kung ang Estado mismo ay sinabi ninyong human rights defender, ay ang mga ahente nito, siya mismong naglabag ng karapatang pantao natin. Kaya nagsusulong tayo ng ganitong batas. Hindi ho natin pwedeng sabihin na ibahin na natin ang pakahulugan ng sino ba ang naglalabag ng kasaligaan ng karapatang pantao at ano ba itong mga human rights defenders na ito. Buhay na karanasan ho namin yan. At hindi ho ito patungkol lamang sa nangyayari ngayon. Nung mga nakaraang panahon, ngayon, at sa inahirap nating panahon, habang hindi ho na tuloy-tuloy ang paglabag ng karapatang pangtao, habang tuloy-tuloy ang ganitong sistema ng ating bayan, na ang ating lipunan ay walang kalutasan doon sa grabing kahirapan ng ating mamamayan, nag-aalsa ang mamamayan dahil sa grabing kahirapan, at andyan yung real threat to the lives and rights of our people. No? So wag ho sanang maliitin ng inyong kagawaran ang pagsusulong ng ganitong panukalang batas. Salamat, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Zarate. Yes, Yusek Katura, I want to
Madam
respond.
Chair, yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Congressman Zarate. It has never been the intention of this representation, Madam, as well as our office, to diminish the experience, the tragic experience of human rights defenders. No? I have been working closely with NGOs before, and you know, Madam Chair, we also need to raise these concerns because these are the concerns which are expressed coming from many members of government. You know? Kaya nga po nasabi ko kanina, meron kaming proseso din. No, kami po ay isang secretariat ng isang komite na parang ganito rin po na within the executive, we also need to come up with our own collective position. At para mapag-usapan ho ng maayos ito, at ito bukas naman ho sa mga NGOs na sumama. And kaya nga po, sabi nga natin dito, we always stand by the adage that kahit na po sabihin natin na iisa na lang yan, but it's still one case too many, ang isang kaso ng human rights violation. However po, tinitindi natin dito, talaga ang hikain naman ng pamahalaan ng Estado na kahit paano, maging naman siyang isang human rights defender. No? Ginagawa niya po through the very many mechanisms na nariyan na po. Kasi sabi natin dito, we are giving ourselves a chance to strengthen all these mechanisms. We have AO35, we went to the extent of even encouraging a tripartite mechanism where everyone can participate in an inclusive environment. So ang tanong ko nga po dito, have we really availed of these mechanisms? Or do we prefer to just work out outside of this mechanism? Pero patuloy pa natin. In fact, the PNP, kahit po meron mga reservations yan, will be the first one to tell you, the security sector, handa kami makipag-engage. Pero nasaan sila? Nasaan sila sa mekanismong ito? Hindi naman po pwede tayo magkaroon ng isa na lamang na, o isa kanya-kanyang mekanismo, sinasabi na mas tama ito. Ang sinasabi po natin dito, may obligasyon ang Estado kasi tayo nga po, ang Estado nga po ang duty bearer eh. And then admittedly po talaga, even among us, of course, we need to stress, and I need to share the concerns of Chair Chito, na it's indeed the obligation of the state as a human rights duty bearer na talagang tutukan po ito. No? So ito po yung kabahagi ng pagpapalakas din. No? So ang sinasabi po natin dito at this time, if there are certain issues with regards to pursuing the Human Rights Defenders Act, and if it will somehow delay the process in our own strengthening, process, di sinasabi po namin, hinay-hinay po muna dito sa mga ibang aspetong ito. But what we are telling you is, ang proseso po namin ay tuloy-tuloy na gumagalaw. At ito'y napag-uusapan. In fact, ganito po nga yan. I would even appeal to the committee na alam ko pong marami po kayo mga human rights issues na pag-uusapan dito. We would like to be also informed of this so that even at the level of the committee, pwede na po namin pag-usapan prior to even engaging with this committee. So ganun po yung aming mekanismo na meron din. So, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Yusek Catora. May we know if you have specific opinion on the different provisions, or your position is for the bill as a whole?
So far, we've gone through, we reviewed, it's a very cursory review of the entire bill. And indeed, sa definition pa lang po, nagkaroon agad kami mga questions doon. And we would like to present this before respeto rin po namin yung aming mga member ng committee, which is, actually po, makikita ninyo, ay mga kasama rin ninyo dito ngayon. Pero mas maganda rin po na magkakaisa tayo, kami, para at least man lang, maayos po yung aming pag-present sa inyo.
Thank you, Yusek. Of course, we welcome your comments and opinions. And I hope that you could furnish this committee for the information, to give advice, of course, to the authors and the members of the committee so we can have a complete overview and extensive deliberation on the bill.
Ma'am, this is what we can commit. We will convene a meeting of the PHR, the Presidential Human Rights Committee, and we will intensively discuss this, ma'am.
Thank you, Yusek.
And if there's a need for us to get the resource persons from anyone, we'll do so.
Okay, thank you, Yusek. Honorable Zarate, you're raising your hand.
Yes, Madam Chair, we understand that the Secretariat will have its own process, no? But at this point, I think wag hong maliitin, no, na nagsusulong tayo, naghahanap tayo ng mga kapamaraanan, solusyon sa realidad na tuloy-tuloy nga ang paglabag sa karapatang pantao. No? They have their own process. Okay, go on with your process. Napakarami ng opisina ng executive dito. No? Ang PNP, they have their own human rights office. The Office of the President, mayroong secretariat. And there's an independent body, the CHR. No? But at this point that we are deliberating on this bill, malinaw naman ang inirerehistro kaagad na tayo, no, ng Secretariat ng PHRC na hinahinay lang kayo dyan. Maraming dapat tutukan. Hindi yan importante. For them probably, but to us who are pushing for this bill since the 14th Congress, at ngayon nga lang ho nagkaroon ng pagdinig ito dito sa Kongreso, sa 17th Congress, as pointed out by the Chair. 12 years yung nilalabi ito rito ng mga human rights defenders. And itong committee na ito, PHRC, I think it's, ngayon lang naman tinayo itong committee na ito, no? Nagbuo ng secretariat, if I'm not mistaken. At ang pagtingin kaagad nila ay dahan-dahan lang yan, no? May ibang usapin. So may I suggest, Madam Chair, that we also solicit the comments of other. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, Yusek Catora.
Perhaps I also need to properly introduce our organization, our office. The PHRC, Madam Chair, has been one of the first offices that were created under the Cory administration. And in fact, we even tell ourselves that ito po yung nanay ng Commission on Human Rights. No? But we have stayed very much under the shadows of the Office of the President precisely because one is we give due respect to the Commission on Human Rights. And then again, if we are being consulted on human rights matters, that we provide advice. No, Madam Chair, but even if we go through the minutes of on the rare occasions that we've been invited by this committee, you will note, Madam Chair, that we've always been very supportive of the concerns of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek. And we will make a commitment from today that we will always invite you in our committee meetings. Thank you, Yusek. We, of course, acknowledge your valuable comment and opinions on the bill because this is now the part of the agenda. So we are deliberating on this. But first, we'll hear all the opinions and comments of all other resource persons. May we call on Mr. Bayani Mercado from DFA UNIO? Yes, okay.
Good morning, Madam
Sorry,
Chair.
Ambassador.
Okay na ho yun. Pagka lang ho kami based abroad, when we're assigned here, Mr. Mercado will suffice. Salamat po. Good morning ho, and good morning to all the other honorable members of this committee. Thank you for inviting us, Madam Chair, to this committee hearing. But just like our PNP and DOJ colleagues, we received copies of your proposed bills only last Friday. And our Office for Administration and Human Relations Office need more time to study the political and legal implications of this particular section relating to the deployment of human rights attachés and deputizing overseas Filipinos to monitor human rights practices in other countries. As you know, Madam Chair, when you assign an attaché, he or she has to be accredited with the host government. And we are not sure if the host government would be keen on having a human rights attaché in their country, because if you do so, they may think there's something wrong in their country. That's why you're sending a human rights attaché. So we would like to study this part there and maybe ask our foreign service posts if there are such kind of attachés in their respective jurisdiction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador. We welcome your opinion on the matter. Next, may we call on Dr. Romel Lenatok of National Council of Churches in the Philippines.
Magandang umaga po sa ating mga magigiting pong mga mababatas. Nung binabanggit niyo po, Madam Chair, at binanggit din po ng mga authors that na nakatago po siya sa loob ng 12 taon, I'm looking back at my friends, katrabaho na namayapa, pinatay, nawala, nandahil sa pagtatanggol nila sa karapatang pantao. Yung binanggit po kanina ni Congressman Zarate ng mga pangalan ay Mga pastor po namin, naka-anim ng National Council of Churches in the Philippines. At kapag ang pinag-uusapan po natin mga tao sa grounds, community, grassroots, we need this kind of law, ganitong batas na magpuprotekta. Nagpapasalamat po kami sa Diyos, buhay pa po ang ating Commission on Human Rights na nagsasalita pa rin sa karapatang pantao. Nagpapasalamat din po kami sa mga congressman na nagsusulong ng ganitong klase ng panukalang batas. Kaya ang aming pong dalangin sa pagpunta po dito ay may pasa po ang ganitong batas na tunay na magpuprotekta sa mga taong nagpuprotekta din po sa karapatang pantao. So let me read our official statement from the National Council of Churches in the Philippines. NCCP supports House Bill 1617. The National Council of Churches in the Philippines asserts that humans were created in the image of God. Life and human dignity are gifts from God. As such, they should be protected, not to be distorted, defaced, and shattered. We also believe that human dignity is God's gift to humanity. Human rights are humanity's gift to itself. This means that human rights are the result of the people's struggle throughout history for abundant life, enshrined through laws and international instruments. The preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that whereas recognition of the inherent dignity of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. With the creation of UDHR in 1948, the community of nations professed what the scriptures had already made clear, the inherent dignity and inalienable rights of every person. Anumang uri niya sa lipunan, anumang katatayuan niya sa lipunan. In Genesis 1:26-27, humans are created in God's image. When rights are denied and violated, the divine image within the human person is violated and the dignity that it confers diminished. Jesus Christ was persecuted and faced death for his ministry to uphold human dignity, a life abundant for all human beings. By standing for the others, he was crucified. This path he chose is no different for the human rights defenders who tirelessly work to be a mouthpiece for the oppressed and vulnerable. For the human rights defenders who do not give up despite the hardships of their chosen path, despite facing threats to their safety and even their loved ones, they are surely following the path of Jesus. Thus, the defense of human rights is part of our Christian witnessing and mission. Through the years, the NCCP has demonstrated this belief by using its prophetic voice in advocating in the national and international arena in order to uphold human rights in the country through our educations, fora, conferences, as well as lobbying in the Congress. Throughout the existence of the Council and its former General Secretary Bishop Laverne D. Mercado, who was a staunch human rights defender during the Marcos dictatorship, had his share of harsh experiences as state agents illegally arrested him for being mouthpiece by the religious against the abuses of the state. Human rights defenders, by definition, are individuals, groups, and organizations working for human rights, civil and political, as well as social, economic, and cultural rights. If we're talking on the process, then let us respect the process of a human being. Let us respect human rights. In the Philippines, there is a need to adopt urgent measures to protect the right defenders and to ensure that they are able to carry out their important work. In recent years, a number of cases involving death threats and killings of human rights defenders have been recorded by the human rights group like the Karapatan. Many of the cases of HRBs involve in individuals and organizations working to defend the right to a healthy environment. The dangers being faced by the human rights defenders in the Philippines are a source of concern even in the United Nations Human Rights Council, especially in the recent Universal Periodic Review on the Philippines last May. Since 2001, during the time of former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo, up to the present, human rights violations are being committed against human rights defenders in the total climate of impunity. Many are farmers, indigenous peoples, and environmental activists who have stood up against the encroachment of mostly environmental destructive projects in their communities. Churches, church people, including lay members who have been actively working in various human rights advocacy programs, have also become targets of personal vilification, threats, and various forms of violations. We have seen the culture of impunity persist in our country, where those who engage in extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, torture, and other grave human rights abuses are not investigated or brought before the bar of legal justice. Worse, some of them are even promoted. None of the extrajudicial killings that occurred under past administrations have been addressed despite promises. Rather, we have witnessed continued incidents of gross human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings and a continued perpetuation of the culture of impunity. Our clarion call to the government to end impunity still rings true with utmost urgency. Thus, the NCCP supports House Bill number 1617 on our Act defining certain rights of human rights defenders and providing penalties for violations thereof in implementation of the 1998 UN Declaration on the Rights and Responsibility of Individuals, Groups, and Organs of Society to promote and protect universally recognized human rights, or otherwise known as the UN Declaration on Human Rights Defenders. And we deem it as very timely. The bill is designed to address the protection of human rights defenders against any form of state violence or harassment that may be inflicted upon them. It respects the divine image within every person and in protecting the human dignity that being created in the image of God confers. We sincerely thanking the authors and sponsors of this bill. And then we are asking God's grace to bless this committee, to be enlightened, to act immediately and urgently. Dahil hindi po natin pag-aksyon ay mas maraming buhay ang nawawala at maraming pamilya po ang nangungulila. Maraming pong salamat sa committee na to.
Thank you, Pastor Romel Linantok. Can we request a copy of that position? Thank you. Next, may we call on our representative from Forum Asia, Ms. Pimsiri Petchamrob. Could you please take a seat there? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's actually our honor to be here in the House of Representatives of the Philippines and be able to deliver our opinions on the bill. Let me begin here. The Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development works with 59 members organizations in 18 countries all over the Asia. So I can assure you, if the House of Representatives of the Philippines pass this bill, this one is going to be a milestone, not only in Southeast Asia, but all over the region. But to a certain extent, there are some observations from our side that I want to raise here as well. Sorry, looking for information. Okay. From our point of view, the definition of human rights defender can be actually broadened in the bill, because in the bill it says person or people who related to human rights organization. But actually, according to Declaration on Human Rights Defenders, adopted by UN mechanism, even it sounds like a UN imposed definition, but at least is widely accepted or universally accepted. So the definition under the bill says quite broad on it gives broad definition on human rights defender. It refers to individuals, group, association contributing to the effective elimination of all violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms of people and individuals. So it basically doesn't mean anyone who directly related to human rights organization. It could be people who defend human rights to professional activities, paid or voluntary. Or it could be people who defend human rights in a non-professional context as well. So in this case, instead of putting narrow definition, we can use a universally accepted definition to broaden the term of human rights defender in the bill. So that is our first observation. And the second observation, according to consultation we have conducted with human rights defenders at national level, as well as human rights defender from community level in the past year, there are some proposals which some already included in the proposed bill. But let me emphasize here that it is important for human rights defenders to have freedom from surveillance, freedom from harassment, freedom from threats and intimidation, and freedom to have the right to peaceful assembly, freedom of expression, and freedom to organize, as well as the right to life, and freedom from unlawful arrest, freedom from extrajudicial killings, torture, and enforced disappearances, and also the right to remedy and redress. So this proposal we get from consultations we have been conducting with Filipino human rights defenders in the past few years. And there are some observations on the obligation of public authorities. There's a certain document produced by organization called ISHR based in Geneva. I think it's very useful to share with all of you here because they put it quite clear on the model law, and they emphasize the obligation of public authorities. So the first one, in any human rights bill, public authorities should be obliged to respect, promote, protect, and fulfill the right of human rights defender. Second point, public authority has obligation to facilitate the activities and the work of the human rights defenders. Third, obligation to provide free access to material relating to human rights and fundamental freedom. Fourth, public authority shall be obliged not to disclose confidential sources related to human rights defender. Next, six, public authority has obligation to prevent and to ensure protection against intimidation or reprisal from both state and non-state actors. And public authority also has obligation to ensure protection against arbitrary or unlawful intrusion and interference. The next, public authority also has obligation to conduct prompt and transparent investigation in case there are incidents related to the safety of human rights defender. Next, public authority has obligation to ensure effective remedy and full reparation. Next one, okay, three more. Public authority has an obligation to make intimidation and reprisals an offense to the human rights defender. The next one, public authority has obligation to promote and facilitate human rights education in the country. And also public authority also has an obligation to implement protection and urgent protection measures for human rights defender. And the last one, public authority is obliged to assist human rights defenders in their work, also locally and nationally. We can submit the briefing paper after this because this is kind of brief and not too much in details, so we can elaborate more on what we discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pimsiri. We appreciate a printed copy of your comment. Because I noticed that some of those that you have mentioned are not really included in the bill. So we will furnish the authors a copy of your inputs and your comments. Thank you. Okay, next we call on Attorney Rolando Gonzalez of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. May we request that we turn off the other microphones so we can hear our resource persons. Thank you.
Chair, I have just been delegated by the NCLA, or National Center for Legal Aid, National Director, Madam Minerva Ambrosio, as well as the President of the IBP, Attorney Fajardo, so that I could not have time to communicate with them as to what matters will be discussed today, since this is only my first appearance. But looking briefly on the certain provisions of the bills that will be the subject of enactment into law, I observed that the approval of the bill proposed by the Honorable Representative Evelina G. Escudero would mean a vast power to be delegated, vast powers to be delegated to the Commission on Human Rights, such as the investigative powers.
Attorney Gonzalez, may I just cut you off there?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but we are still discussing the Human Rights Defenders Bill filed by Honorable Zarate. But we'll call you later, sir, when we are about to discuss the Charter Amendment.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
May we now call on Mr. Wilnor Papa of Amnesty International.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maraming salamat po sa pag-imbita sa amin at saka maraming salamat sa komite dahil finally, sabi nga nung ating colleague from Karapatan that we are finally seeing the light of day with regards to this bill which has been filed noong 14th Congress pa. Sa pag-aaral po ng Amnesty International all over the world, it's almost similar situation at hindi natin pwedeng sabihin sa Asia lang nangyayari, ano? In countries such as Hungary and Poland in Europe, sa Russia, sa China, kapitbahay natin, Malaysia, sa Egypt, at even sa US, no, yung mga gobyerno ay mukhang nagte-take on ng strong arm or strong hand at hardline tactics against people who are just basically demanding kung ano yung pinaka-basic sa kanila, no? Freedoms and equality, na siguro hindi na natin kailangan isa-isahin ngayon. Pero yung pinaglalaban noong civil rights movement sa US at pinaglaban ng mga Pilipino noong panahon ng mga Kastila ay pareho pa rin sa pinaglalaban natin ngayon. Ang difference lang, mas marami tayong mechanisms. Pero yun nga, kailangan ba natin ng dagdag mechanism sa paniwala po ng Amnesty International as long as hindi enough, hindi na sustain ng present mechanisms natin yung tinatawag nating respect, protection, and fulfillment ng human rights, kailangan natin magkaroon ng additional mechanisms to make sure that our rights are protected at the utmost na kakayanin. Hindi lamang ng Estado, kundi ng bawat isa dito sa atin. Do we need to have this before things happen? Sa tingin ng Amnesty International, hindi na, kumbaga sa mga colleagues ko from Amnesty, they don't need to wait for me to be abducted, tortured, killed, disappeared, before they do something. Kailangan ngayon pa lang, meron na tayong mga protective mechanisms to make sure that None of us here, hindi lamang kami sa human rights community, pati sa mga kasamahan natin sa gobyerno, pati sa mga kasamahan natin sa labas ng kwarto na ito, ay maprotektahan ng tinatawag nating mechanisms na binubuo natin. While many governments will consider this measure as controversial, we see it as a progress. And we do laud the authors for pushing for this bill because hindi lamang ito progreso pagdating doon sa pagtingin sa Pilipinas sa international community tulad ng sinabi ng ating kasama mula sa Forum Asia, pero progreso mismo dito sa loob ng ating bansa na kung saan nagkakaroon tayo ng polisiya to make sure that yung tinatawag nating respect, protection, fulfillment, and promotion of human rights ay nagiging one step further. Hindi lamang sa institusyon na ito, hopefully pati sa ating national government. So, nabanggit na po ng ating mga kasama kung ano pa yung mga finer points patungkol dito, pero Amnesty International is in full support of this measure. We will submit within the next 2 days yung mas detailed na position paper po namin dito to make this bill particularly stronger, to add finer details, and to add provisions with regards to additional protective mechanisms, rehabilitation, and information and education. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wilnor Papa. I will wait for, of course, a written comment. Thank you. May we now call on General Jack Motriel from the AFP HRAL. I'm sorry for disturbing your lunch, sir, but this is a working lunch. Please go ahead.
Madam Chair, good morning po, and to all of the stakeholders in the cause for human rights protection. Good morning. We actually received the House Bill, a copy of House Bill 1617, the proposed bill. We are one with the Presidential Human Rights Committee Secretariat on their position, ma'am, also. But may I just read the first paragraph of our prepared comments, because it sums up everything that we actually think about this bill. While it may be considered noble on the part of Congress to enact a law protecting human rights defenders, it is respectfully submitted that parameters should be laid down on who is or may be considered as human rights defenders under the law. Philippine law seeks to protect anyone who, whatever his or her background or advocacy. That is the essence of equal protection of the law in our legal system. As added protection, so-called human rights defenders and organizations must be legally created and have legal personality, also to prevent abuse and confusion. Along this line, the Commission on Human Rights may even be accredited to, may even accredit who to determine who human rights defenders may be, being the national human rights institution in the country. Some questions arise. For example, do we still need a law on this since everyone is protected by the law, even the so-called defenders of democracy, good governance, civil liberties, and the rule of law? Isn't it that our current laws already cover crimes that are considered human rights violations? For example, the Anti-Enforced Disappearance Law, Anti-Torture Law, the revised penal code provisions on killings, threats, intimidation, coercion, etc., and including remedies such as the writ of amparo, writ of habeas data, writ of habeas corpus. We welcome discussions as we express reservations on the reason to enact a law on human rights defenders. That's all, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, General Martiril. We'll also wait for your written comment and opinion. Thank you. I think we already heard all our resource persons with respect to this bill filed by Honorable Zarate, Tino, De Jesus Castro, Rosas, Casilao, and Elago. It appears that we don't have most of the opinions, the written positions of all our resource persons. Maybe before the chair will go on to the next agenda, may we hear from our authors?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Considering that this is yet the initial deliberation of House Bill 1617, may we pray that another hearing be conducted so as to also receive the, so that we can receive formally the position papers of the different stakeholders present here and the others who are yet to be invited to this committee, Madam Chair. And as I understand, there are other similar bills in the Committee on Rules.
There might be one pending bill before the Committee on Rules that haven't been referred to us yet.
So as to await the referral of that bill to this committee, we request that another hearing be conducted on this bill, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Zarate. As stated by the principal author, this is just the initial deliberation on this bill, or House Bill number 1617. And the committee is not yet in receipt of all the written position papers. In that respect, we'll just...
Madam Chair,
yes,
just
Honorable
a quick note.
Go ahead.
Considering that in House Bill number 1617, in relation to our next item, there's a power given here to the Commission on Human Rights. I hope the Commission will, in their position paper, will provide a detailed comment on that. The power to issue a temporary protection order, and probably it can be incorporated in their charter, no, as well as the right to cite, powers to cite in contempt of the Commission. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Zarate. Yes, Chairman.
As I mentioned in my prefatory statement, the Commission will be preparing a written statement, and we will address specific aspects of the proposed bill that we welcome for purposes of further strengthening the protection mechanism for human rights defenders, and perhaps the role that the Commission can play in that regard.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairman Gascon. Yes, Honorable.
Yes, Madam Chair, may I also suggest that the official position paper comments of the agencies invited today be submitted as soon as possible prior to the scheduling or to put into calendar the next hearing for the members and for this committee to study in advance your official comments and position paper, and also for the Commission on Human Rights, Madam Chair, to study the possibility of not only the recommendation of AFP and the PHRC with regards to definition and accreditation of human rights defenders, groups or organization, but also the possibility of deputization of human rights defenders in performing one specific functions that is currently being performed by CHR as particular to inspection, deputization of human rights defenders to inspect military camps, safe houses, prison cells, as being performed currently by CHR. Is it possible also for the human rights defenders not only being accredited, but also to extend those mentioned functions to those accredited human rights defenders, Madam Chair?
Thank you, Honorable Casilao.
Yes, Your Honor, we will address those specific questions that were raised in this committee with our own recommendations. Actually, even pending this bill, currently because of the situation and the crisis impacting human rights, the Commission itself is currently deliberating the possibility of preparing a resolution for purposes of mobilizing and accrediting and deputizing our partners in the human rights community to assist us. Perhaps not to the extent that you had suggested yet, Your Honors, but certainly in the work of documentation, Your Honors. This is something we are considering very seriously, and a resolution from the NBank might be forthcoming for purposes of creating the more effective coordination with human rights groups pending the measure, Your Honor. Of course, we will welcome specific mandates from law that will further strengthen and bolster the ability of both the Commission as well as the broad human rights community to respond to the specific human rights challenges, Your Honor.
Yes, Madam Chair, the premise of my suggestion dwells from my experience in the deliberation of the Labor Committee, because in reality, labor inspectors are very limited in numbers. Likewise, the Commission on Human Rights, even though they are scattered in every region, but their personnel are also limited in numbers. Now, the idea of deputizing other stakeholders in performance of specific functions, like labor inspectors in respective unions within respective employers or corporations, the DOLE issued a department order to extend deputization of labor standard inspectors in private institutions or corporations, so that to para bang force multiplier in the sense. Yeah. So that is why that proposition of this representation we welcome the possibility or the comments of the Commission on Human Rights, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Casilo. Yes, Yusek Katura.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Taking off from the just concluded discussion, I would like to respectfully remind the committee that there's one mechanism that has yet to be set in place, and it is the National Preventive Mechanism. And I think there's a bill on that. Now, that should be able to cover some of the concerns with regards to monitoring. Now, and definitely, Madam Chair, this is something which we need to pursue, because it's our commitment as a signatory to the optional protocol. Thank you.
Duly noted, Yusek Katura. For the information of our resource persons and, of course, the members of this committee, that we already finished the technical working group and created the substitute bill with respect to the National Preventive Mechanism, or the NPM bills. And that's already elevated to the mother committee. Okay, thank you. May we get the commitment from our resource persons to please, can we submit all the written position papers, if possible, next week? Okay, thank you so much. At this point in time, since this is just an initial deliberation, we'll end our discussion, and we'll proceed, we'll end our discussion on the bill on the Human Rights Offenders Act, and we'll proceed with the next agenda, which is the bills on the amendment of the Charter of the Commission on Human Rights. Do we need a 5-minute break? Hindi na. Andito mga authors natin. Okay. May we call on our authors to give their sponsorship speech? Well, let's start with Honorable Lawrence Fortun and then Honorable Escudero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, after hearing the preliminary remarks of the Honorable Chair of the Committee, it was already in effect sponsorship of this House bill, and I'm very happy to hear that from the Chair herself of probably one of the most important committees of the House, if not the most important. I say this is one of the most important because, as Kapepe Jokno said, no cause is more worthy than the cause of human rights. They are what makes man human. If you deny man of his human rights, you deny him of his humanity. Nonetheless, Madam Chair, let me just mention some portions of the explanatory note, specifically on the emphasis laid by the Constitution as a very important mandate of Congress in giving highest priority to human rights. Our Constitution provides the Congress shall give highest priority to the enactment of measures that protect and enhance the right of all people to human dignity, reduce social, economic, and political inequalities, and remove cultural inequities by equitably diffusing wealth and political power for the common good. Pursuant to the state policy, Madam Chair, Section 17 of the same article provided for the creation of an independent office known as the Commission on Human Rights, with the power, among others, to investigate human rights violations involving civil and political rights, provide appropriate legal measures for the protection of human rights, exercise visitorial powers over jails and detention facilities, implement a continuing program of research, education, and information to enhance respect for the primacy of human rights, recommend to Congress effective measures to promote human rights and to provide for compensation to victims of violations of human rights or their families, etc. While the Commission has been instrumental, Madam Chair, to the protection of human rights in the country, its efforts, consistent with its current mandate, have been devoted to civil and political rights. Other forms of deprivation or violation of the right to human dignity, such as poverty, various forms of discrimination, and social exclusion, have not been the focus of the Commission. Even in the pursuance of civil and political rights, the Commission is handicapped by such limitations as lack of prosecutorial powers, lack of power to issue immediate relief measures for human rights violations, and real fiscal autonomy that should ensure its independence as a constitutional commission. The bill, Madam Chair, seeks to strengthen the Commission on Human Rights by expanding its mandate to cover economic, social, and cultural rights to be more in keeping with Article 13, Section 1 of the Constitution, granting it the power to issue temporary relief measures, such as protection orders as stated by the Honorable Zarate, residual prosecutorial powers, real fiscal autonomy, and strengthening its structural organization. The bill aims to ensure that the Commission, created under the Constitution pursuant to a declared state policy, is able to fully perform its mandate to ensure the dignity of every human person and guarantee full respect for human rights. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Fortune. That's his sponsorship speech for House Bill number 2343. Before we proceed with Honorable Escudero, I would like to recognize the presence of one of our authors here, my predecessor in the Committee of Human Rights, the previous chair of this committee, Honorable Rene Relampagos. Okay. Now, may we... Kayo pa muna. Kayo pa yung next naman. Now we call on our... the most beautiful tita in Congress. One of our principal authors, Honorable Evelina Escudero, for House Bill number 3217.
Maraming salamat, Chairman. Salamat din sa paburi. This bill 3217 has been a refiled bill of the 15th Congress, and the bill seeks to strengthen the Commission by providing some teeth to the Commission and providing an effective and expanded structural and functional organization to meet the demands of the human rights cases here and abroad. The same thing as the bill of Congressman Fortune. It would also give prosecutorial power to the Commission to equip it with a significant power, if not only to realize its mandate under Article 8 of the Constitution. Primarily, the Commission will exercise original jurisdiction to investigate on complaint or motu proprio cases of human rights violations to include civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. The investigation of human rights violations shall not be subject to any statute or limitations or a prescriptive period. Another provision that we have put in this particular bill is that the Commission may grant immunity from persecution to any person whose possession and production of documents and other evidence may be necessary to determine the truth in any hearing, inquiry, or proceeding under such terms and conditions as it may determine, taking into account the pertinent provisions of the rules of court and its own rules. The bill also provides three things. It will strengthen its witness protection program, provision of the security, shelter, relocation, livelihood assistance to witnesses and their families. It will also give financial assistance program, legal assistance program, and the creation of an ad hoc truth commissions. I think, Madam Chair, this would be very relevant as well during these particular times when we need some more teeth for the Commission on Human Rights. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you, Honorable Evelina Escudero. That's her sponsorship speech for House Bill 3217. Now we go to the next author, Honorable Rene Relampagos, for his House Bill number 1303.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, my distinguished colleagues here present in today's meeting of the Committee on Human Rights, as well as our resource persons who are here in attendance, and all other guests of this committee meeting. A pleasant good morning to one and all. I would like to begin by way of saying that insofar as House Bill number 1303, which this representation has filed, is more or less of the same intent as that of my other colleagues who have also filed a similar bill, and that is to strengthen the Commission on Human Rights in the light of certain realities that we see. Well, just to go back, the CHR was created under the 1987 Constitution, and then its implementation based on the constitutional provision was based on EO 163. To date, however, of all the constitutional bodies, it is only the Commission on Human Rights that has no charter of its own. And to date, there are many laws which elaborate on or outrightly gives the CHR additional functions, like, for example, the anti-torture law, the anti-enforced disappearance law, the Human Security Act, Magna Carta of Women, juvenile justice, and so many other laws. But what this bill seeks to do is it would like to incorporate these functions as well. We are not trying to create a super commission here, but we just want to have an independent, efficient, and relevant office with powers as envisioned under the Constitution. So yes, to strengthening it, but not giving it super powers to encroach on the other offices. Now, insofar as the issue on fiscal autonomy is concerned, the Constitution is silent on this. But we are of the view that there is a need to grant the CHR full fiscal autonomy. So other than the points already raised by my other colleagues here, we are also in agreement that there is a need for CHR to be given prosecutorial powers, because for so long a time, the CHR has always been viewed as a toothless tiger. And so it is on this light that I would like to recommend that we consider the passage of this bill. Of course, considering that there are many bills filed for this, hopefully consolidate and come up with one bill that will address all the issues that are obtaining right now as far as this very important concern is concerned. So thank you and good morning.
Thank you, Honorable Relampagos. That's his sponsorship speech for House Bill 1303. The other two authors, Honorable Tambunting and Honorable Alejano, are not here. So we'll proceed with opinions and comments from our resource persons. We'll start with Chairman Chito Gascon from the Commission on Human Rights.
Thank you again, Honorable Chair of the Commission, of the committee, and members of the Human Rights Committee, as well as the principal authors of the bill. We have had several meetings and hearings about this matter, and we first want to express the gratitude of the members of the Commission on Human Rights, all the commissioners and the staff, for the concern and commitment expressed by the honorable authors of the proposed charter bill, as well as the committee for putting priority to this measure. This measure has also been pending for quite some time, and as noted by the Honorable Relampagos, the Commission on Human Rights is the only constitutional office created by the Constitution that has yet to have its own charter bill. The current legal framework for the Commission remains just the constitutional provisions and EO 163 issued by President Cory Aquino when she had legislative powers. Thus, it is really incumbent on the part of Congress to seriously consider how it might wish to provide full realization of the spirit and intent of the constitutional provisions by enacting a charter bill for the Commission. And we are prepared to work with the committee and its technical working group in a consolidated measure, taking into account the very strong and good positions taken in each of the different bills. We want to thank in particular the three authors here present, Congressman Relampagos for House Bill 1303, Congressman Lau Fortun for House Bill 2343, Congresswoman Escudero for House Bill 3217, as well as the other two who are not present, Congressman Alejano and Tambunting. Perhaps we can work with you in hammering out the details of a measure that will ultimately strengthen and give life to the intention of the Constitution, especially now when there are discussions and deliberations across the spectrum, from strengthening the Commission, giving it more budget in the course of the budget deliberations, to even proposals of abolishing it or giving it zero budget. So you have a full spectrum of ideas, and we will rely upon our friends. We will rely upon our friends and allies in Congress, many of them here present. We still believe that the Congress is a vibrant and democratic institution that has multiple views and ideas. We understand that the perspective of the Speaker is weighty, matimbang, kumbaga. Subalit, naniniwala kami na mananaig yung katotohanan at ang katwiran, at makikita po ng mga membro ng Kongreso yung kahalagahan pa rin at papel ng trabaho ng Commission on Human Rights sangayon sa mandato ng Saligang Batas. Sa kasalukuyan, maraming mga kahinaan ang komisyon, at sa tulong po ninyo, maaaring mapunuan itong mga kahinaan ito, itong mga kakulangan, nang sa gayon makatugon kami sa mga kaganapan. Nung nabanggit ni Congressman Relampagos na kami ay isang toothless tiger, ewan ko kung napansin niya na nabungi ako dito. At sabi sa akin ni Commissioner Lea, baka mabuti hindi ko na muna paayusin yung ngipin ko hanggat hindi na ipapasa ang measure na ito. Ewan ko po kung yun po ang gagawin natin. Pero matagal na pong panahon na hinihintay ng Commission ang pagpapalakas sa pamagitan ng Charter Bill. We welcome all of the very good contributions and suggestions being made, and we're ready to work with all of you. We hope that the honorable members of the House here present, as well as your other colleagues, might see right and reason in the necessity of strengthening the Commission on Human Rights, especially at this difficult time.
Thank you, Chairman Chito. Just a quick question. The committee is in receipt of your draft bill, an act strengthening Commission on Human Rights and for other purpose. I just received this this morning, so I haven't gone through the whole provisions. May we know if is this also the same as the bills filed by our authors?
Your Honor, it's similar. It is in a sense a draft from the perspective of the Commission based on its experience. However, we of course will defer to the wisdom of Congress. And as I said, we welcome the very strong recommendations being made by the different authors in their respective bills. Please consider this draft as our contribution to the work of the technical working group. And they are not set in stone, Your Honor, and that we are prepared to work with the authors in coming out with a measure that this committee is prepared to accept and to present to the plenary that is in accordance with the collective wisdom of the honorable members.
Thank you, Chairman Gascon. Yes, Honorable Scudero.
Madam Chair, therefore I suggest that we consolidate the bill and form a TWG. I move so, Madam Chair.
Yes, Honorable Scudero. We already formed a technical working group which shall be chaired by Honorable Glona Labad-Labad. That was in the first few meetings, organizational meeting of this committee. But we haven't set yet a date for the TWG. So we now, before we refer all the bills for technical working group, may we ask some of the comments and opinions of our resource persons who are present this morning. Just rough input or comments. May we call on a representative from the Department of Justice? Yes, Attorney Mendoza.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. We'd like to reiterate that we will be submitting our official position because we just received it last August 9. Specifically on our strong reservations on the prosecutorial functions of the CHR. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Mendoza. We'll wait for your comment and a written comment. Now, Yusek Katura informed us earlier before he left that he'll also be submitting their position here. And now we call on representative from PNP H. Rao. PNP H. Rao. Yes, Police Superintendent Peñalosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have already submitted the official position or comment of the PNP signed by the Chief PNP on December 9, 2016. If the chairman will still allow me to read the contents of the position or comments, ma'am.
You can give a rough or just a brief presentation of the salient points because we will go to the specific details during the technical working group. Please proceed, Superintendent Peñalosa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pertaining to the CHR Charter, the PNP in general supports the intents and purposes of the aforementioned House Bill. However, we express our reservations on the provisions as to 1, enter and inspect the premises of any government agency or office, specifically police and military stations, installations, camps, bases, and training schools without need for prior information. And a similar provision as to the exercise of unhampered and unrestrained visitorial powers over jails, prisons, or detention facilities without need for prior information. Allowing the inspection and premises of any government agency or office, specifically police and military stations, installations, camps, bases, and training schools without need for prior information would contravene one of the government's three-pronged strategy, particularly the National Peace and Development Plan, which mandates the PNP to provide appropriate measures to government vital installations or facilities, defense of community, and protection of the people from insurgent terrorist actions. While the Memorandum of Understanding between the PNP and the CHR to uphold the visitorial powers of the latter had been in effect since 2009, allowing unhampered, unrestricted, and unrestrained access to custodial facilities of the PNP and entering, inspecting police and military stations without need for prior information may invite possibility of security breaches. Moreover, some custodial facilities in the PNP accommodate high-risk criminals charged with serious offenses ranging from syndicated estafa, kidnapping, robbery, and murder. Hence, established protocols and standard operating procedures should be the primordial consideration in all visits to be undertaken. Prior coordination and an established or agreed protocol should be drafted to address this gap. This gap must be undertaken first. Thank you. On the issuance of human rights clearance, as mentioned in Section 27 of House Bill 1512, it is highly encouraged that the CHR should not deny nor refuse issuance of CHR clearance by the mere fact that a human rights violation, criminal, or administrative case has been filed against the PNP personnel. The basis of refusal must be stemmed on whether or not his case has been decided upon with finality by the proper court or administrative body in consonance with the right to due process. After all, the CHR is the primary guardian of human rights calls for the upholding of the rights to due process. With regard to the issuance of human rights clearance for purposes of promotion, study abroad, or for any other legal purposes, a relaxation of the rule is humbly sought. It is recommended that specific provisions of RA 9708, an act extending for 5 years the reglementary period for complying with the minimum educational qualification for appointment to the PNP and adjusting the promotion system thereof, amending for the purpose pertinent provisions of RA 6975 and RA 8551, be adopted, particularly Section 2, which states, in addition, the institution of a criminal action or complaint against a police officer shall not be a bar to promotion, provided, however, that upon finding a probable cause, notwithstanding any challenge that may be raised against that finding thereafter, the concerned police officer shall be ineligible for promotion, provided further that if the case remains unresolved after 2 years from the aforementioned determination of probable cause, he or she shall be considered for promotion. In the event that he or she is held guilty for the crime by final judgment, said promotion shall be recalled without prejudice to the imposition of the appropriate penalties under applicable laws, rules, and regulations, provided furthermore that if the complaint filed against the police officer is for crime, including but not limited to a violation of human rights, punishable by reclusion perpetua or life imprisonment, the court has determined that the evidence of guilt is strong, said police officer shall be completely ineligible for promotion during the pendency of the said criminal case. The common provisions as to the imprescriptibility of human rights violations, which states that investigation of human rights violations shall be subject to any statute of limitation or prescriptive period. This provision can be subject to abuse by some groups against the security sector, most especially against the PNP, with the intensified campaign against illegal drugs, which often result in the killing of suspects by reason of legitimate police operations. Some sectors may opt for a malicious suspension or holding in abeyance in the filing of criminal charges against PNP personnel and file them after 7 or 10 years or even in a year later to the disadvantage and with malice against PNP personnel by invoking the imprescriptibility rule. It is also a well-settled rule in the jurisdiction that investigation and prosecutions of criminal cases should be prompt and that statutes enforcing such promptitude should be vigorously maintained. They are not merely acts of grace but checks imposed by the state upon itself to exact vigilant activity from its subalterns and to secure for criminal trials the best evidence that can be obtained. Likewise, it bears emphasis, as held in a number of cases, that the interpretation of the law on prescription of crimes, that which is more favorable to the accused, is to be adopted. The said legal principle takes into account the nature of the law on prescription of crimes, which is an act of amnesty and liberality on the part of the state in favor of the offender. And in the case of People versus Moran, the court amply discussed the nature of this statute of limitations in criminal cases as follows. The statute is not statutes of process to be scantily and grudgingly applied, but an amnesty declaring that after a certain time oblivion shall be cast over the offense, that the offender shall be at liberty to return to his country and resume his immunities as a citizen, and that from henceforth he may cease to preserve the proofs of his innocence, for the proofs of his guilt are blotted out. Hence, it is that statutes of limitation that are to be liberally construed in favor of the defendant, not only because such liberality for construction belongs to all acts of amnesty and grace, but because the very existence of the statute is a recognition and notification by the legislature for the fact that time, while it gradually wears out proofs of innocence as assigned to it fixed and positive periods in which it destroys proofs of guilt. That's all your...
Thank you, Superintendent Peñalosa. We are already in receipt of your position, a written position. And there are 3 salient portions that you want to discuss later on during the TWG: the unrestrained visitorial powers, the issuance of human rights clearances, and the imprescriptibility of human rights violations. Okay, we will, I believe that we already furnished our authors a copy of this. Not yet. Okay, we'll ask our ComSec to please furnish all our authors a copy of this position. Now we call on General Jack Motril from the AFP. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ma'am, we have also prepared some comments actually on 16 of the provisions in the various bills, but however, this needs to be consolidated with the other comments also that we have to obtain from offices inside Camp Aguinaldo. So, may we, I'd like to signify our intention to also be part of the TWG so that we can fully support, because we do believe that we need to strengthen the CHR Charter. That would be all, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, General Motril. Yes, you will be part of the TWG. We'll send you the invitation. And by the time, probably, we already are in receipt of your written position on the several, on what you refer to as the different provisions in the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Thank you. Now we proceed with, this is your time, Attorney Gonzalez. Please. This is now the amendment to the CHR Charter.
The provisions of the House bills, so I could not...
We have 5 bills pertaining to
bills,
the
no, no.
amendment to the charter of the Commission
We
on
will make
Human Rights.
our written comment or position papers with this. But my first prima facie observation, Madam Chair, is that there might be clash of functions from different agencies in connection with investigative or prosecutorial functions or that will be given to the CHR. So this, before these bills could be approved, there should be a thorough discussion as to what powers should remain with the CHR while the others may go on hand in hand with the said agencies. As to our office, IBP, our function is only to help the underprivileged people in all matters, including human rights. So there might be no conflict, even if the CHR will investigate matters involving poor people, Your Honor. That's all.
Thank you, Attorney Rolanda Gonzalez from the IBP.
You're welcome.
The committee will just wait for your written comments and position.
Yes, sir.
Now we call on Attorney Mark Wayne from UBank.
Good morning, everyone.
DBM?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Madam Chair, we would just like to inform the body that we have submitted our opposition paper during the previous Congress, and more or less, we will be submitting the same comments. So, for your reference, at this juncture, while we have not yet submitted our position paper for this Congress, the body may use it as a reference.
Thank you, Attorney Eubank. Probably the position paper you submitted was received by Honorable Rene Relampagos because he was then the chair of the Human Rights Committee in the 16th Congress. All right?
Madam Chair, I chaired this committee during the 15th Congress. Yes, yeah.
Okay, but we'll wait for your official position on this, Attorney Eubank.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. I think that's it, but I would like to ask Ambassador Mercado, because I noticed that the previous comment that you made earlier is with respect to the amendment to the charter of the CHR, not on the human rights defenders. Okay, so this is your reservation on putting attaché in a different consulate, Philippine consulate in different countries. Okay. I think that's about it.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Honorable Rampag.
Yes, before we adjourn or whatever, I understand that there was already a technical working group so organized and created previously. May I know the composition of the technical working group?
We don't have a specific composition. We just appointed a chair at that time during the organizational meeting, and we appointed Honorable Glona Labad-Labad.
Such being the case, Madam Chair, I would like to suggest that automatically all the authors will be part of the technical working group, as well as the CHR, which is and then as manifested by the representative of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, also the PNP, DOJ would be very relevant here. And I don't know whether we could have representation from the human rights advocacy groups. We should have representation from that sector also. Yeah. and DBM, because we're talking of full fiscal autonomy here.
Thank you, Honorable Lampagos. Let all the authors be members of the technical working group, and of course, the CHR, and all our resource persons are present today. And the committee will also send invitation to the other CHR, human rights organizations for a more extensive deliberation on these 5 bills. And the gist actually on the amendment to the charter is giving CHR prosecutorial power, fiscal autonomy. And those are the most important portions of the 5 bills. But the committee is still also in the process of preparing the matrix. And given that, and since we have only until 1 o'clock to use this room, there's another committee on deck. So if there be no other comments and opinions, okay, and of course, the motion upon motion of Honorable Lawrence Fortun, this meeting is now hereby adjourned.